Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining this special event on coaching and sports psychology, brought to you by Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK. I'm your host, LA Wilshaw, and joining me today is Associate Lecturer in Sport and Performance Psychology, Dr. Katrina Fraser. Thank you for joining us, Katrina. It's a pleasure to see you.
Hi, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
I'd really like to start off by discovering a little bit about you and your current role.
Sure, absolutely. I guess the best place to start is how I actually ended up in Australia and doing the job I do. As you probably can pick up by now, I'm not a native speaker. I'm definitely not the Aussie. I just somehow ended up here. My journey started actually in Scotland, in St Andrews, where I did my bachelor's. So I came all the way through Eastern Europe from Lithuania, finished high school, went for psychology degree with this idea that, sports psychology, it actually might be for me, being a student athlete myself. Why not? Combining the two subjects together, just give it a go. Finished that, really trying to pursue my dream to become sports and exercise psychologist. And it took me to Edinburgh, to University of Edinburgh, where I did my master's in performance psychology. And I loved the subject. I absolutely fell in love with that. And somehow I ended up enrolled in a PhD. I don't really know how it happened. I guess I just loved research. And at the same time, I was doing my accreditation with BASIS, British Association of Sport and Exercise Scientists, just trying to make sure that I'm following it out properly and becoming accredited. And I've got all the competence I need in order to work with the athletes, because it's quite difficult to do that. It's very easy to make damage because you're working with people more than anything, right? So I was doing both at the same time. I was doing my research, I was teaching, I was an associate tutor at Edinburgh University, finished my PhD, was applying for jobs, got a job in Australia and said, why not? I love sunshine. I want some warmth. I want to change the landscape, and just went for that. And here we are now. Working at university. I am a full-time lecturer. I'm researching, I'm teaching sports, exercise, and performance psychology and behavior change, and got my hands on working with athletes, with performers, with coaches as well, just really trying to make a difference more than anything, whilst advocating in the EDI space, so equity, diversity, and inclusion as much as we can. So this is where I am.
Wow, sounds like you're a real Wonder Woman. So you're at the University of Newcastle in New South Wales, which is 2 to 3 hours north of Sydney, for those that are wondering where exactly you are in the world. And it is nice and sunny for you, isn't it?
Well, it's still cold. It's actually only 6 degrees. But it's funny you mentioned, I am actually moving away from Newcastle, and I'm in this transition at the moment. I'm going to Sydney, to the University of Sydney.
Okay, not too far away then. So tell us all, what exactly is sports psychology?
Right, it's an excellent question. And perhaps we're going to start with what it is not. It's definitely not for someone who has mental health issues, who has some sort of disease, for someone who is abnormal or something is wrong with them. This is what's not, right? It's all about how do we make you a better performer, regardless what you do and who you are. How do you become a better coach? How do you become a better athlete? How do you become a better practitioner in general? So it's this idea of taking someone who is normal and making them super normal. Now, of course, we're going to have people who are experiencing anxiety issues, right? Who are simply lacking coping skills and they're crumbling under pressure. But we're not labeling them as being abnormal. We're just saying that you're lacking certain skills. So it's very important to understand where your competences lie, because if there are any clinical issues, don't get me wrong, people do get depression, people do suffer from eating disorders, for example, in sport, right? So this is when we would refer them to clinical sports psychologists more than anything. In the space I work, it's about how do we make you the best performer you can be, and how do we help you to reach your optimum performance?
Right, yes, because obviously it's general knowledge that athletes physically train, they have special diets. So how exactly does the psychology help them then? How do you help them to enhance their performance?
So everything can come into simple strategies. Do you know how to plan? Can you balance your life and work balance properly? Do you have the skills you need in order to go and train at your best? When it comes to the start line, all the training is done, right? So the sports and exercise psychologist or consultant would come in, but try to make sure that all the preparation is done correctly. So we're getting most out from preparation per se, and we're also working on the mental skills. And I'm very conscious using the word skills because we can work on them. It's as any other skill. If you don't know how to cope with pressure, we can teach you how to do that. But you must be willing to put work in it, right? So it's not about someone doing exercise for you, right? You are the one who needs to do that exercise. You're training your mind at the same time as you're training your body. So when it comes to the start line, all the work is done, and then it's all about implementing your skills into practice.
Right. So how does that apply to motorsports, to drivers?
Right. So think about driving, think about motorsport, right? You're under constant pressure. You're driving laps after laps after laps. You are steering the steering wheel. You are listening to your engineers telling you what's going on. You are feeling the car. You're talking to your engineers and responding to what is going on in the pit court. You are also watching what your opponents are doing, and you're making strategic decisions. Do I sit back? Do I overtake? What strategy will I implement? How am I going to go into that particular corner? Now, add conditions. Is it sunny? Is it wet? What track am I on? So you're exposing the drivers under loads and loads of pressure. They must have a really good reaction time, and they really must know how to stay safe within those dangerous situations, right? Because the stakes are very high. If you crash, that's it, you're out. And it's not a cheap piece of equipment to fix afterwards, right? So the stakes are really, really high. So how can we train the mind, and how can we utilize your training before you get to the start line? Because frankly speaking, it's not swimming. You don't have tracks all over your neighborhood. You can't access the cars 24 hours per day, can you? So you really have to utilize what it is you've got, and mental skills training can help you to do that, as well as sound planning and other strategies alongside.
So would a racing driver have a psychologist like yourself, or would that be a role for somebody like a performance coach?
Right, excellent question. Now, there's a difference between a sports exercise performance psychologist and someone who is a coach, right? It really depends what type of coach we are, what we do, what's their background. And that's something which one has to be very, very careful and mindful of, because someone who is a psychologist, they would go through loads of training, right? And loads of professional development. It's just so much to go with that. And someone who calls themselves a coach, a performance coach, it's really not clear what's their background, what's their knowledge, what's their education, what's their competence, what skills they do have and they don't have. So you really want just to look into that background more than anything. And I guess and they're going to be quite blunt over here, but one way to tell is someone who is a real professional is going to work with you and tell you how it is to make you better. Someone who is not that good of a professional, they might be more of a motivational speaker. They might boost your confidence, they might tell you how good you are, but actually they're not helping you to improve and become an independent, responsible performer more than anything. So that's a really good differentiation between the two.
Okay. Well, you a little bit earlier, you mentioned that you worked with coaches worldwide, and you're currently doing a research study with Olympic coaches. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So when we talk about sports exercise and performance psychology, it's all about the athletes, isn't it? So how do we get most of the athletes? And we forget about the coaches. So sometimes we talk about coaches in terms of, okay, so how do you get most out of your athletes? So what pedagogies you can use? How can you read people? How do you help them to improve? But we often forget that coaches are part of that sports domain, and they spoke to very, very similar demands as the athletes are. So the study I'm currently working on is actually sponsored by International Olympic Committee and the Gender Equality team. And my colleague and I, what we're looking at is gendered experiences of elite coaches, and we're trying to investigate why there are only 10% of accredited female coaches at the Olympic Games in comparison to 90% of accredited male coaches at the Olympic Games. And that's a pattern over last 10 or 15 years, and it's not changing. So that's what we're trying to investigate: what barriers we're experiencing, what needs to change, how do we help them to get most out of them, because essentially they're performers similar to the athletes.
Yeah, I think that again can be comparable to motorsport. In Formula One, we have Angela Cullen, and I, as far as I can remember, she's the only female, coach that coaches the out of all the driver coaches. Yeah, so that's quite interesting research to be doing. And you talk about as well the differences working with male and female athletes, and the benefits of having coaches of both sexes. So how can you explain that?
Yes, it's actually very interesting. So this is what's been coming through the interview. So the study is a mixed method study. So we've conducted the survey, and now we're inviting coaches to actually talk to us. So we've been interviewing the coaches from different parts of the world, different sports, different experiences. And something which is in common is that, yes, the differences how they approach male and female athletes. And funnily speaking, what one of the coaches I spoke to earlier today, she said that female athletes are much more detail oriented. They want to know why something is going on, whereas male athletes were chilled, they are easygoing. It's like, yeah, whatever, coach. Now, other coaches also notice that it might be a little bit more difficult to manage male athletes because they're full of egos. We want to prove a point. We want to do things the way they want to do it rather than follow instruction. Whereas female athletes are much better at following the precise instruction. However, female athletes have a little bit more complicated relationships involved, and they really want to know that the coach cares about them. This is when they get most out of them. And that's very interesting, very subtle difference. And elite coaches who made it work, who have produced elite athletes, to the Olympic Games level, that's what we learned by experience. So it's very interesting to pick up those differences more than anything.
Wow, okay. That is very interesting. And a little bit earlier as well, you mentioned the work you do with BASIS, and you're the chair of the professional body, and the chair of the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And tell us about this role and how it came to you.
Just one of those things when you see it advertised and you tell yourself, why not? If not me, someone else is gonna get it. Why am worse than anyone else? And you're full of this imposterism, so you're full of self-doubt. But essentially, if you really believe in what it is you want to do, you should just go for that. Because the worst thing which can happen is you just receive a negative answer. That's all. So I saw it, I went for that. I was accepted to the committee, and it was newly formed committee. And then I just put my hand up like, you know what? I think I want to give it a go at being this cheer thing. Why not? And here we are, just chairing this committee, which I really believe in. We're doing great work. It's a professional body, so we're trying to what we're really trying to do is we're trying to oversee the profession, sport and exercise scientists themselves, and we're offering lots of training to our members, right? So we did our first webinar, which was a joint webinar with association in the US, and really exploring those links between global diversity, global culture, and its effect on mental health. So how does it work worldwide? So that's part of the work I do. And as I mentioned earlier on, I guess my purpose in life and work is to make a difference, to make a significant difference. And I do strongly believe that people should have equal opportunities, and some of them just need a little bit more of advanced start. And this is where I guess girls in motorsport come in, isn't it? Because motorsport is very male dominated. So how can we help the girls to get more into this motorsport, so that if they have more girls coming in at the grassroots, more girls can actually achieve the elite level? So this is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the BASIS is the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. So did that come about while you were over here at Edinburgh?
Yeah, so I've got my accreditation with them as well. So I became a student member. I went through all this first experience, got involved, got engaged, moved overseas, continued my professional development with them more than anything. And listen, as you know, anyone can tell now what COVID has actually taught us, that time zone doesn't matter anymore. The physical place doesn't matter anymore. Everyone was so quick to move online, and that's why it wasn't a barrier and actually getting then and becoming a chair to the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
So does BASIS work with other sporting organisations then?
To some extent, yes.
Does it work with motorsport, for instance?
So it's not about what organizations we work with, it's more about the members and the members, I guess, their background and what organizations they work with. So basically, it would be more of a professional body to all the sport and exercise scientists. So really making sure that the standards are met, the professional development is being delivered. And as a professional, you can come in and you can actually have this peer advice and support with others to make sure that you're at the top of the ball, you learn from others, you're sharing case studies. And yes, there are quite a few professionals working in motorsport in the UK and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, the FIA Women in Motorsport, you know, it's over a decade. And I think what it says on their particular website, what their mantra is, you know, it's intense effort and activity and engagement. And exactly sort of repeating what you just said, you know, it's encouragement and awareness of inclusivity and therefore participation, which is exactly, you know, I know you talked about grassroots, but I also feel like even somebody from my generation, you know, that comes from an incredibly male dominated generation, or, you know, opportunities can come to anybody of any age group. But it's absolutely wonderful, you know, what Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK are also doing for the community as a whole and for females. And so regarding those broader societal issues, you know, I think there's some quote on your biography, you know, how else do we get society moving forward? How, in your opinion, can gender equality be addressed in motorsport?
You know, it's very hard to talk about equality when we don't really understand equity to begin with, right? So throughout the years, throughout the history, what happened was we created those gender roles. We created sports which perceived to be gender appropriate. So in other words, as a woman, you should go on do gymnastics, dance, do aesthetics related sport. As a boy, as a young man, you should go and show off your strength, your stamina, your endurance, right? Your being aggressive. So throughout the society and history, those roles were created and those sports were created. So it's very hard to it's really hard to achieve equality when there's still those perceptions in mind, right? So we have to break the barrier somehow, right? So we have to show that being a strong, muscular woman, it's okay. It's still beautiful, right? So you don't have to be lean, you don't have to be petite, you don't have to be small and flexible. It's okay to be different. And what do you mean by saying different? Equally, for a man, it's okay to be flexible, it's okay to be petite, it's okay to show emotions, not to be this alpha man. So it goes both ways. So you really have to work on equity first to make sure that there are more opportunities for girls in order to be exposed to driving, in order to talk more about engines and say it's okay to be interested in engineering, right? It's okay to be interested in all those masculine sports. It's okay to run around and climb the trees and drive a vehicle. And that way we get them into the sport, or we get them into that area, that domain of interest much earlier on, which means we've got simply more exposure, more like longer training time, longer training history, which becomes more equivalent to a male opponent. So that way we can start talking about equality once we know that both genders, so both sexes, but we've got similar background and exposure to similar opportunities more than anything.
Yes, I suppose it's about changing the idea of all those stereotypes, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, FIA Girls on Track are forging ahead, with workshops and programs, their virtual experience, their Girls on Track initiative, and there's lots of little pockets appearing, all over for young women around the world to not only become a racing driver, but to become an engineer, to become, an aerodynamic specialist. And there are many wonderful programs being brought up at the moment, and even these webinars too, raising the awareness of Motorsport UK and Girls on Track UK are very busy doing. So how are you personally making a difference, Katrina?
I hope I am making a difference. I guess for me, making a difference, sometimes it comes changing the perspective of one of my students in classroom and just saying, hey, it's not okay. What it is we're experiencing now is not okay, or don't be afraid to stand up, or you are 20, 21, students are getting younger these days, and you're still experiencing gender related stereotypes. And some of the rugby players are telling me how girls players are treated differently in the same club in comparison to males, especially after COVID, because it's male sport which is being promoted in comparison to female sport. And it's like, here you are, we're in 21st century, and they're still discussing those issues in the classroom. So that's one. So hopefully, I'm raising awareness of future practitioners. Two, working with athletes, developing the understanding, working with coaches, and really trying to change that mentality from like old school, as people would say, really trying to recognize, even if you don't feel there are differences, some people experience difference. So you can't really deny someone's experiences they grew up with, and this is what they experience in sport. So really trying to work with practitioners that way. And then through professional standards and offering, awareness training to professionals to help them to work better with athletes and coming in and raising that awareness, because it's not only about creating opportunities, it's also about raising awareness of people who work with drivers, right? So as an engineer, it's okay to explain all this detail to a female driver, right? As a parent, it's okay to talk about the same subjects to your daughter who is interested in racing. So it's not only about investing into the athletes, it's also about investing in all those people around them to change the environment. And I guess that's the key, to change the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's sort of lots of hashtags that go around women empowering women, but it's also very important that men empower women too. So this kind of was, sorry, in response to that, sorry.
Yeah, just response to that. It's very important that women support women as well, because more often than not, we can be our own enemies. And that's something we have to acknowledge as well.
Yeah, for sure. So was this kind of work always your ambition?
Um, no, I have to say, I have to be honest with you, and fair answer is no. It's probably when I was going through my PhD and professional experiences. And then, I was faced with this, oh, you're not a native speaker. You're so young. You're telling me how to raise my children. It's like, no, I'm telling you how to deal with an athlete who just happened to be your child. And just like being faced with those stereotypes more than anything. I guess this is when I sat back, I thought about it, and I went, you know what? I'm not alone. Someone else must be experiencing the same. And just really just trying to make a difference for future generations to come more than anything. So it's been probably, it has become a journey over the last 5 years or so.
Okay. So we generally get quite a lot of people inspired, by the webinars that Motorsport UK and Girls on Track UK put out. So what is your advice for those people watching who are inspired by yourself? And the question that generally they ask is, how do I do what you're doing? So can you offer some advice for people out there, including the education route for the young girls that are thinking about this kind of a career?
The educational route is quite, I guess, long to begin with. And I would say just don't cut the corners. If it's something you're passionate in, you really want to do it, find out what your options are, find out how you can get there, and just do it properly, because it's going to really, really pay off. It's hard to watch other people, flying in their careers, but, spending 10 years educating myself and getting in the area, it was really, really worthwhile. It just, all the experiences which come with that, it was really, really worthwhile. So that's one. Two, always reach out to someone who is similar to you or who is doing something similar to what it is you want to do, and get advice. It's okay to send an email. When I get an email from someone who wants to do sports and exercise psychology, I'll go, yay! I can talk to someone, I can mentor someone. Get a mentor, volunteer, try to get as many and as different experiences as possible, because everything counts. And sometimes it's about figuring out what you don't like to do. And it's equally important. So just going for that and really trying to better understand what it is and what it is you like.
Yes, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think that can go for, men and young men, young women that are watching, but also at any age of people that are watching, because, there are plenty of people out there that are also looking for a change in career, and a new start. And, the online community has now exploded, after last year and after the pandemic. And I think some people fear that they may not live close enough to somewhere or somebody, but with this, even us two chatting now, you're 10,000 miles away, and I feel like we're in the same room. It doesn't matter. The online community is now out there, and I think that people can reach out that way too. But obviously get involved in any programs that you can, and in your area if possible. I've done a lot of volunteer work locally at football teams, and if you love sport, then get yourself into sport, and if you love motorsport, then try and forge your path. It's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you.